Okay, good morning, good Erev Shabbos. Uh, Today is Lag BaOmer. Hopefully, there were no injuries because of all the various bonfires throughout Israel and elsewhere. Uh, the period of Omer, we've talked about it before, is a very interesting period historically. But halachically, it's really based more on minhag than anything else. And of course, we've been exploring minhagim over the course of our discussions. Uh, if you ask, I would say 99% of people who are learned why there is a mourning period between Pesach and Shavuos, and why we don't shave, and why we don't have weddings and so forth during this period. Most people will tell you it's because Rabbi Akiva's students died between Pesach and Shavuos. Okay. While it is true, according to Gemara in Yevamos, Samach Daled, that in fact Rabbi Akiva's students did die between Pesach and Shavuos, in all probability because of the Bar Kokhba revolt. That's a separate discussion. But nowhere following that discussion, nowhere in the Gemara, nowhere in Bavli Yerushalmi, is there any connection between this horrible tragedy of the cream of the crop of Torah scholars dying or being killed. There's no connection between that and any type of national mourning. It's not mentioned anywhere. The earliest mention, this happened in the first century. 900 years later, the Rimigash mentions that the minhag, again, the word minhag is not to have celebrations, specifically refers to weddings. It's only another couple hundred years later that in the Jeroshos of one of the students of the tour, that he mentions this business about shaving. And then somehow it became morphed into the psyche of the Jewish people. And ultimately, the Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah, simply says it's customary. It doesn't say it's a halacha. It is a minhag not to shave, not to get married, or celebrations between Pesach and Shavuos. Okay. It's a minhag that does not have a halachic basis, but once it has become such a entrenched minhag, then it becomes practically a halacha. Like a lot of things having to do with avelus, with mourning practices, are minhagim. I had the privilege, along with Rabbi Yudin, of spending 3 years learning with Rav David Lifshitz, Zechat Tzadok Livracha. And for the short period of time that I was in the Rabbanus, I had sent him questions, and he wrote back. And I remember one particular letter, I had 7 questions. The 7th question, and he answered all my questions. He gave me a good psak halacha. But the 7th question, I went through the discussion I just had, and I said to him, why is there a minhag vavelus during Sfira? There are no sources for it. And that was the one question he never answered. So what became a minhag became so entrenched in a certain segment of our population that it's customary not to shave either between Pesach and Lag BaOmer or from Rosh Chodesh until Shavuos. The reality, however, is that, in my humble opinion, again, it's my opinion, I'm not asking for anybody, but it's my opinion that Sfiras HaOmer pretty much doesn't exist anymore because people have parties. We had our shul dinner during Sfira last week. We have people have bar mitzvahs. Rabbi Yudin's son was bar mitzvah during Sfira, way back when, Gotch, at Fairland Jewish Center. So people switch minhagim, and so there's one other question halachically, and that is that the word tisporet refers to haircuts. So not having a haircut during this period is universal, pretty much. Where does shaving come in? So does Poret include shaving or not? And shaving is tiglachat. It's smoothing out with a razor or scissors or what have you. So that's a separate discussion. Rav Aaron Lichtenstein gave a shiur on this once, on analyzing, and he goes into all the halacha of Avelus. In Avelus, you don't shave. You're a mourner. You're sad. So you don't shave. You don't do many, many things. How long don't you shave for? So the technical term is called Shiur Ga'ara. Shiur Ga'ara means when your friends will tell you, hey, you look terrible, go get a shave. That's Shiur Ga'ara. So today, since most people shave every day or every other day, after a couple of days, you look unkempt without shaving. And your friends say, go get a shave. So that's one thing. The second thing, there are many, many halachos involved in preparing for Shabbos. Hachana l'Shabbos is a very important concept. And therefore, on that basis alone, Hachana l'Shabbos trumps not shaving during the week for Sfira. And once you've reached Shiur Ga'ara, then you should definitely shave before Shabbos. And it's certainly permissible. Normally, we say that a person doesn't shave after losing a parent for almost a year. Generally speaking, most people just don't shave or get a haircut for 30 days. That's certainly Shiur Ga'ara today. There's a big machlokas in the Gemara about Tisporet versus Tiglachat. During Sfira, the Omer, the Avelus is certainly much more toned down, shall I say. It's not the same emotional feeling that you have after losing a parent or another family member. So mourning during the Omer period, you have to find very specific parameters of what you may or may not do. And again, it's a minhag. And as we've said before, we're dealing with halachas of minhagim. Now, I will say, and I'm giving an assignment to anybody who wants to look this up, why is it common among many, many cultures, especially ancient cultures, Persian, Babylonian, Greek, and Roman, and even Jewish? Why was it customary to believe that during the period between Pesach and Shavuos is a period of bad omens? It's bad luck. And therefore, since it's bad luck, we don't have weddings or other happy celebrations during that period. That's quite common. Maybe to a certain extent, we kind of borrowed some of that into our folklore, if you will. I do know that there's a Mishnah in a not too often studied Masechta, I think it's Yadayim, end of the second parak. And it says two things. First, it says that Mishpat Rishoyim Gehenim, judgment of the evil in Gehenim, takes place between Pesach and Shavuos. So that's an indication that it's not a good time. The same Mishnah, another Tana says that the Mishpat Rishoyim Gehenim is Yud Beis Chodesh, lasts 12 months, which is why, by the way, we only say Kaddish for 11 months, because you don't want to say that your parent is a Russia. So, but the fact that there's this cultural borrowing about this particular period, it's always fascinated me. I never had time to go into it in great detail, but if somebody wants to look it up or Google it and find out what it is among all the various ancient nations that felt this time period was a period of bad luck, and therefore you didn't have celebrations or parties, etc., which may have transferred over to the Jewish community. But again, the earliest mention is very, very late, not until the Middle Ages. My own personal theory is that the Avelus during Sfira has to do with the Crusades, because the first crusade started in 1096, Pope Urban II There were 22 crusades lasting about 2 centuries. And during the early crusade period, major annihilation of Jewish communities and yeshivas took place. After all, if you're marching through Europe to free Jerusalem from the infidel Arabs, which was the purpose of the crusade, well, you're passing through Jewish communities. What greater infidel can there be than Jews? So they killed them as well. And Speyer, Worms, all the great yeshivas in Europe, Rashi's teachers, all the great, they were destroyed. It was terrible. And there were tremendous amounts of piyutim written about them. We say them on Tisha B'Av. There are many communities that read what they called Memorbicher, memorial books of names of all the people that were killed in the various crusades. And that's where Yizkor started. And that's where the Kaddish began. And also the whole notion of Avelus during this period became much more fortified and strengthened, because that was something that should be mourned. But again, if you ask the average rabbi or the average yeshiva bacher, why is there Avelus during Shiur? Say because Rabbi Akiva's students died, which is true. They did die between Pesach and Shavuos, but it was never declared a period of mourning. And that's a question that I've yet to find a good answer to. Coming back to our initial topic, if you don't shave, if you have a beard already, and you don't shave for a couple of days, all right, not so terrible. Nobody's going to notice it. But the average person who doesn't have a beard would reach what they call a Shiur Gara. He would look unkempt. Again, I can't speak for what's considered modern style or modern fashion. These Hollywood types, or the fashionistas, so to speak, you see guys walking around with unshaven faces. That's considered to be fashionable. From a halakhic perspective, it's not. And therefore, if a person reaches a Shiur Gara, when somebody would rebuke you, say, get a shave already, that would take place certainly during the week and certainly before Shabbos. And it's certainly if a person doesn't want to shave during the week because of the minhag of Sfira, he doesn't have to, but he's definitely permitted, according to Rav Lichtenstein and according to many others, to shave L'Kavod Shabbos. A, it's Shiur Gara, even for a mourner, and B, Kavod Shabbos requires preparation, washing, cleaning. So, and again, you have to be aware, we live in a very modern society, and in our society, people shower daily, people shave daily, people wash their clothing on a regular basis. It wasn't always that way. You have to remember, indoor plumbing is a relatively recent innovation. If you wanted to take a bath, you had to schlep the water in from a well. You had to fill up a tub. You had to build a fire to warm the water. It was a big deal. And if you had a family, people took turns using the same bath water because it was too much of an effort to get fresh water for every single person. So that didn't happen all. And when it happened, it was, if you were the last person online in a big family, the water wasn't exactly the most hygienic. Shaving, hair cutting is the same thing. You can't use a razor on your beard. Scissors don't do the job. So you grew a beard. Everybody had a beard. It was easier than trying to use depilatories or other ways to shave. So the only other time you have a similar situation, and there the Mishnah already talks about it, is during the 9 days. Some say 3 weeks. But the period starting with Rosh Chodesh Av, that's a much more severe issue of cutting one's hair and shaving, because that's already in the Mishnah. And the real Isur is Shavua Shechalbo. You have 3 weeks. You have the 9 days, and then the week of Tisha B'Av itself, and Tisha B'Av the day. But Shiur Shachalbo is the most severe prohibition against shaving. The 9 days is also very severe. 3 weeks is a minhag that many people have, but the Mishnah only says from beginning of Rosh Chodesh. So you can guide yourself with that. And that's the only situation where the Mishnah talks about specifically not shaving or getting haircuts. But as far as Shiur is concerned, the earliest thing is medieval, and there's a lot of discussion about it. I have yet to find a strong enough source, other than the fact that this could be a strong enough source. I don't mean to diminish minhagim, but this minhag became almost like a halacha in certain communities. In the more right-wing Jewish communities, people are much more makpid about not shaving during Sefira. Although, as I said, look, my son is a musician. His business does not slack off during Sefira. It doesn't. He has weddings, he has bat mitzvahs. For some reason, Sefira, there was a time when you didn't have parties during Sefira. There was a time when people were much more. I remember when I was I was teaching in Hebrew school, and a bunch of people, I had a car, and a bunch of us from Washington Heights drove to New Jersey to teach in Hebrew school several times a week. And one of the young ladies, who's now married to a friend of mine, we were all teaching there together, and she says, please make sure you don't play music on the radio during Sefira. So that's an extra extension of some of the Avelus aspects of Sefira. If you acknowledge that it was for the Crusades, then I can see that being as a legitimate expression of Avelus. For the death of Rabbi Akiva's students, also a legitimate expression of Avelus. But nobody makes a connection to Rabbi Akiva's students in the Gemara. And it was a tremendous tragedy. Nobody makes a connection to the Shoah. It says, during this period of time, we're going to adopt certain minhagim of Avelus. Now, maybe it's because of modesty. They feel they can't start new minhagim. Okay, I can understand that. But at least somebody might suggest it. So one of the exciting things about investigation, I like to think to myself as a detective. I like to try to discover things. And I'm constantly looking through the Rishonim, through the Achronim, to try to find answers to questions that I might have. Not everybody else might share those questions or be interested in it, but clearly you come up with some fascinating discoveries if you look hard enough. So bottom line, there are 2 reasons for people who shave daily to shave during Sefira on a regular weekday, certainly before Shabbos. The Shir Gara, where people will look unpresentable, and also it's undignified, and that's only, you're only supposed to look that way during Shiva. Probably not during Shloshim, although that's been more accepted, and certainly not during the 12-month period that the Omer parallels, according to the Rimigash. The Rimigash, by the way, was the Rebbe of the Rambam's father. Kavod Shabbos takes precedence over mourning customs of the Omer, based on the Gemara and Tanis, and not only is it permissible, but probably obligatory to shave before Shabbos. And that's pretty much what I have to say on that topic. Any questions, comments, suggestions, critiques? Very quiet this morning. Okay.
Wally, I just want to let you know and let everybody know that today, 19 years ago, you had the privilege on our anniversary to give the first shiur of year number 20. We started actually on Lag BaOmer, on a Tuesday. That's why Rabbi Yudin called it Torah Tuesday back then. We started in the year 2006 on Lag Bomer. So you have the privilege of kicking off the year number 20. So that's, I think, a very big accomplishment for us.
Halavai weiter. All right.
Yeah. Okay. Have a good Shabbos.
Have a great
Have a good Shabbos. Thank you, Wally.
Thank you, Wally, and a good Shabbos to all.
Good Shabbos.
And good Shabbos to all.
Chag Sameach.
Thank you.
Lag Bomer.
And Lag Baomer Someach.
Okay, you too, Janusz. Have a good Shabbos.
Thank you,
Janusz.
Rabbi. Thank you. Hello, hello.